Welcome to Recovery Comes Home Radio, your go-to podcast for all things related to addiction recovery. Whether you are an individual in recovery, a concerned loved one, or a dedicated professional, this podcast is tailored just for you. Here we are all about empowering you with the tools, insights, and inspiration you need to move forward. So grab your headphones, tune in, and let's embark on this transformative journey together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Recovery Comes Home Radio. I can't wait to share this next guest with you. Robin Thomas is here with us today. She's a lifestyle coach and a community leader in her own right in the health and holistic health and wellness space. She studies chronic and autoimmune diseases, and you might wonder what that has to do with recovery. But, we believe that recovery from anything is how you do recovery from everything. So Robin has founded the Living Well Connections, which supports, educates, and empowers us all to make healthy decisions toward a more balanced and fulfilling life. I think that's perfectly in line with our mission. So Robin, I can't wait to introduce you to our audience. Please tell us your story and how you got here. Give us a start.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really so grateful that you invited me to be on your show. This is wonderful because getting the word out that we end up living our life, and we end up, especially when we're going through a challenging situation, you end up on this kind of automatic coping mechanisms that sometimes work and often frequently just gradually make things worse. And I discovered that too. My background is in medical research. For 25 years, I did medical research. I was basically in the people doing the work. I was in the lab and I was in the hospital enrolling patients who all had autoimmune disorders or chronic degenerative disorders. And we were looking at inflammation. Inflammation is the cause of an awful lot of, or it's the result and the cause of a lot of issues. But at the same time, I was a mom. I had two young boys when I started there. And my husband helps a lot too. He was very supportive. But my second child was diagnosed with one autoimmune disease at 17 months. It was type 1 diabetes. Mm-hmm. But then he got diagnosed later on with Hashimoto's, the thyroid,
Hashimoto's
inflammation. But one of the things that happened to him was because he was diagnosed so young, and because at the time medicine research had a trial of diabetics, type 1 diabetics, and they said that keeping the blood sugar low was a good thing to prevent long-term side effects of having diabetes for so many years. Well, it's not a good thing when you're a baby or a toddler, because they kept his blood sugar so low, it starved his brain. So he ended up acquired brain injury.
Wow.
And people are always asking, well, when was the accident or what happened? I said, it wasn't an accident. It was a long-term thing, little bits of time of the brain while it was developing, not getting enough energy to it.
Absolutely. I've been there. Yep.
So,
you can't. Nutrition, it's interesting that you bring this up, because I had a conversation with a nutritionist about specifically, usually in the addicted brain, the prefrontal cortex is not functioning properly because that regulatory system is out of whack. And so, because they're taking something to get up and something to go to bed. And so the natural system doesn't produce those normal oxytocins that we have to make us happy. But nutrition specifically, a lot of addicts and alcoholics don't pay attention to their intake of food. They're either trying to put food in their belly because they know they need to have something in their belly when they're drinking, or they're too busy. And understand that we know now that addiction is so much more than alcohol and drugs. There are people that are literally strapping diapers on themselves so they can continue to play their video games.
Yeah, it's true. And also there's food addictions.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially sugar.
Sugar is
and so a typical corrosive thing you want to crave. And I can see alcohol tends to have you want to crave sugar too.
Well, it's made of sugar. It's actually the alcohol isn't the problem. It's the sugar.
It's the sugar. Yeah.
And people don't understand that that's why a lot of people gain weight after they get into recovery, because they just switch addictions. Yeah.
Yes, it's addiction.
They switch. Yeah. And it's becoming all pervasive now. And that's why I really wanted I read a quote that you said, when I woke up to my own personal reality 20 years ago, I started realizing that negative habits were ruling my life.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
That's what it is,
drinking.
right? Negative habits.
Yeah.
Coping mechanisms that go wrong.
Exactly. But it seems okay at the time, but the more you do it, and my negative habits, I mean, I was sort of raised addicted to sugar because my mom loves sugar. So there was that. So I'd reach for the donut for breakfast. I mean, these are little things. They sound very insignificant, but when it builds up day after day, that becomes significant. So for my personal case so I was grabbing a donut for breakfast. I was drinking coffee all morning in the lab because coffee was free. And then I grabbed something out of the vending machine for lunch. How healthy can that be?
Was it a honey bun or maybe some ding dongs?
That was breakfast. A honey bun was breakfast. And it was probably, I don't know if you know what nabs are, but it's just like these orange crackers with peanut butter in them. It's a thing of that. And I was just running on empty and not sleeping well. And what I really woke up to, but never diagnosed, but what I woke up to was the fact that I was having trouble getting out of bed. I was having trouble moving my body. I was having trouble just existing. And then, of course, there was the stress on top of that, or it was a back and forth that caused more stress, but it also the stress of raising a disabled child.
And I wonder if you could talk to our audience about that, because even though, like we said earlier, on the surface, it looks like, well, how can this possibly apply to me? But it really is not straightforward. Everybody has heard now of fentanyl, but people don't know what to do when addiction comes knocking at their door. Who do I trust?
Well, exactly. And anybody who has needed any kind of surgery or any kind of, or if they've been in an accident or something, I mean, that is so common to become addicted to the painkillers.
Yes. A lot of dealers have it doesn't work anymore. And then the doctors who are in white coats somehow make it acceptable, even though you're not being a good manager of your own life. If you were the CEO of my life, I'd fire you. But society, in large part, condones things that are quote unquote legal, but not healthy.
So true. And then also in my situation, of course, my son's in his mid-30s now. So there was a long period of time where we were working with physicians and they were prescribing. With his brain injury, the two things that are very easy to see about his brain injury, he doesn't look brain injured. He actually looks very healthy. It's almost like autism for a young person.
Yeah.
Because he has none of that short-term memory. He has long-term memories, but the short-term memory is gone. But he also, that in tune leads to anxiety. So he was having panic attacks. So they were wanting to medicate him for this anxiety and the panic attacks. And I think I have 3 full typewritten pages of things we tried.
Oh, yes. And that's where our parents can relate, right? Is that if it's your child, you have never seen a fighter until you see a mama bear.
Mama bears. Yeah. You try and you try. And I did switch to this isn't working for him. But then there was the battle between the board certified physician who said, no, he needs these drugs. And I was seeing that wasn't doing anything for him in the positive.
Now, I can really relate to your story too, because I was diagnosed with a birth anomaly. I have a divided pancreas, and then I got taken out playing co-ed softball at 23. So my life changed later on, but I've had also suffered from not induced brain injury, but acquired as well, because I was in situations where oxygen wasn't getting to my brain.
Yeah.
And I had to learn a new way to be. It's a different situation because your son was young. I had already had some life behind me, and then everything changed. But whether it's illness, whether it's brain injury, whether it's cancer, whether it's death or addiction, we all, I think the medical community, people are dissatisfied with a lot of the advice that's coming out of the medical community. They're finding out that doctors aren't gods.
Right.
And there is no magic pill. There's not a magic pill for any of us. No magic bullet. How do you deal day to day with the stresses of having such an atypical relationship with the people that are supposed to help you.
Yeah. And also I was working with some of these people, but how do I deal with working with the physicians? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, just the day in and day out of having to have so much more on your plate because your son is not the typical, because that's what our parents are facing, right? They can't sit down at the mani-pedi station and talk to the girl about their son is smoking meth again.
Right. Right.
Where do you go?
It's tough.
Who do you talk
takes
to?
an awful lot. There's an awful lot of, just working. I mean, you have to fill your own cup before you can keep taking care of someone else over and over again.
I love that.
But it can be difficult. Like you said, people, go get a massage. Well, when do I have time to go get a massage?
And who's going to take care of my kid while I'm out there?
And who's going to take care of my kid while I'm going to do that? And why people say, well, why don't you like to travel? Well, yes, I like to travel, but it's challenging. It's challenging.
So you mentioned self-care, and that's something that we stress over and over to our family members, because by the time they get to us, they are exhausted.
Well, I found incorporating small habits, even and these days you can find some things just on YouTube that can be very helpful. Working on developing a mindset of gratitude. Now, in the earlier days, now it's become easier, and now I broaden it. In the earlier days, what I fixated on was just walk outside and look up and see the blue sky, as little as that, but be grateful for it. Or be grateful, or I do love nature. So you see a flower blooming, just live in that moment. I mean, there's a lot of years that it's just, I lived in the moment. So I took the positive as I could in that moment and nourished that.
Yeah. And that's a choice, isn't it?
It is a choice, and it can be hard at first. It's going to be very difficult in the beginning, but the time in my life that I had to, for my own sanity. I have to go, and because I love the outdoors so much, not everybody loves the outdoors, but you can find something that you really love. Or if you have a pet, pets can be music, listen to music, in YouTube, there's a number of things that you can listen to are gratitude statements. People are recording these, a lot of different people are recording these. And even this month, I'm doing a kind of a gratitude challenge, where I wake up and the first thing I do is, while I'm getting ready for the morning, I'm listening to a YouTube video that is just saying gratitude statements. I found it easy to do that because it's hard to come up on your own with.
Yeah. How do you avoid slipping into a pity party?
Exactly. And that's how I do it, is just find small things I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Celebrate the little wins. Yeah. I mean, in recovery communities, we have slogans at first, and then we celebrate the first day that you walk in with a white chip. Right. And then there's a 30-day, a 60-day, a 90-day, and then not again until 6 months, and then not again until a year. And that was designed on purpose, because in the beginning, like you're talking about, you're seasoned now. Yeah. That's why you're on sharing your wisdom with our audience, is because you've been through the circus and come out on the other side. Not saying that your life is perfect today, but you've got some things down that you didn't have in the beginning.
I have methods. I find, for me, another thing is, for different people, if you can exercise in some way that you enjoy, that movement. I mean, I like to combine things too, as far as time. Like I can do a little gratitude statements while I'm moving. Yeah. I find, for me personally, those more methodical, calming movements, because I didn't need to be revved up anymore.
No.
For something that's more like yoga or Pilates or Tai Chi, that kind of thing. And those are all things you can do totally by yourself on your own. Again, you can grab a YouTube and find that. But other people are more they do better with taking a walk or running or doing something much more active. Both, I think what works for the individual is the best thing to get started with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have a starting point that we've developed. We call them the ABCs of recovery. It's accept your situation and take action. Be brave enough to start over and over again until you get your goal, and create a stellar support system around yourself. Yeah. And I think they're applicable here as well.
Absolutely.
The parents feel alone. Terrified.
Because you look out and it looks like nobody else is going through what you're going as a parent.
Right. And you're desperate.
But it's not true. They're out there, but you are developing a community where, oh, okay, somebody else is doing, okay, what did they do in a certain situation?
Right.
Mine is
it's
a
that
little bit different,
collaboration.
but it's like parallel.
Yeah, it's like parallel. I think that one thing that people don't realize is how all consuming and how exhausting the role of caregiver, which our parents are caregivers. They are battle fatigued. They are just waiting for the phone to stop ringing because somebody's in trouble again, or they're dead, or they're in jail. And it's not something that we talk about in polite conversation.
Right. Yeah, no, you don't just bring it up. You don't.
Yeah, do you do that? Do you say, let me tell you about my disabled son.
Yeah.
And how close we are because of the things that we had to go through, but how we barely survived the things we had to go through. You learned how to hold on to hope. How did you do that?
Oh, wow. I wouldn't give up. This thing you say, do things over and over again, or something slightly different, always searching for what would work. I found a number of dead ends that didn't work. Now I understand it may not have worked for us in our family, but it would work for someone else. So I don't discount anything if anyone's wanted to try. My husband and I actually have survived all this. What we see is so many divorces happen.
Absolutely.
Because it's so stressful. And what we've been very, very conscious is not blaming each other.
Oh gosh, that's huge.
Things. That is huge. And in some of it, we had to bite our lips and kind of work through that. But it's worthwhile to work hard at that, because having my husband still here involved gives me a little bit of respite, and I give him a little bit of respite. But I do know many people who are alone in this situation as the caregiver.
Yeah, the statistics are not good. It's about an 80% divorce rate when there's somebody in the family with an illness of any kind, physical, mental.
Of any kind. Even if it's not mental illness or just any kind of illness. And I think the second best thing is to really find someone close that you can open up to, or somebody you can talk about it. Because like you said, it's not something you just go out into the world and start talking about it.
Now, how did that work out for you? Did you find other parents that were going through similar things and coalesce?
Well, at first he was going to a clinic that was specifically for juvenile diabetes. And it was his kids, around his age or a little bit older, parents of kids that were a little bit older. And we reached out to each other, but that was not completely helpful. It was partially helpful.
Right. You find a lot of that, don't you? We find a lot of that in our business where it's like, oh, okay, this is helping in certain ways, but in other ways, it's just creating more problems down the road.
Yeah. It was one of my big searches was finding healthcare providers that I could really talk to and had much more of an open mind as far as alternatives.
Yes.
The very first person who gave us hope, because we were like going down a tunnel without no light at the end. And finally, we had a little bit of hope. I'm trying to think of how old my son was. He was about 17, 18, and life was really tough those years. We found somebody, actually found it from a business. I started a business in order to be able to be more available at home.
Yep.
I
totally get it.
It takes a lot of time too, but at least I was at home. And if I needed to stop, but I discovered a functional neurologist,
right? And how it actually works in your system.
Worked in my system. And he said, and the first thing he did, because all the other neurologists, they would examine my son. And if he didn't fit any peg, they didn't know what to do with it. And the functional neurologist said, let's look at the whole body. Let's look at everything. Mm-hmm. So he is the first person who brought dietary issues in.
Yeah. And nutrition is huge.
And nutrition is huge. It is huge. And
for all of us, I think we don't realize
getting us into the light at the end of the tunnel. And you say, oh my gosh, there were just waves of, you brought my son back that I knew.
Wow.
And then he would go away and then come back. But it brought that light of, there's hope. And to be able to hold on to hope. And sometimes it's not the whole day. I mean, at that time, that hope would happen. We'd get maybe 20, 30 minutes a day that we had that hope. But it grew and grew and grew. And now it's a surprise. We call them brain farts.
Yeah.
Like he's on the whole happy, doing very well. He's off the vast majority of all those medications, psychotropic medications that he was on. He's off of everything because he developed epilepsy too. So we're controlling that. But
and the anti-seizure medicines are also some of the same crossover meds they use for anti-anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's on a mix of things. He's on a mix of plain nutritional supplements and things, but also you have to find out what works for your individual.
What motivates you to go the extra mile?
Wow. Just seeing him when he's happy and just having those times, to be perfectly honest, wanting to have a more normal life. When he was being very sick, he was in fetal position on his bed, screaming most of the day.
Yeah. Now, as a mother, that had to be horrific to watch.
It's so hard. And he was like, that's when he was 16, 17 years old. So that's when we finally found the functional neurologist who, okay, let's start with diet and then move on. And he gave him different things, movements to do, slow. Like I said, those slow movements, they really help you, that mind-body connection.
Well, a lot of times, as we talked about earlier before the call, in the people that have an addicted or alcoholic brain, there is some prefrontal cortex damage.
Yeah.
And that regulates the whole executive functioning. And then they revert back to the reptilian brain, which is fight or flight.
Well, yeah, we've gone through all of that. We went through all of it. He was definitely in reptilian brain when he met the functional neurologist.
And how do I say this? How do you move past the issue that your child has without making the child the problem? Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to...
Yeah.
How do you love your child, but not like the behavior and move through that?
A lot of that self-healing meditation or a lot of that. A lot of holding on to the little bits that are working and focusing on, that's working. And also forgiving myself. I had a lot of guilt feelings in the beginning that I didn't even know I had. So because I was the one giving him his insulin shots, which ended up doing the brain injury.
Right.
And I knew logically,
not your fault.
I just was doing what the doctors were telling me. But deep in, and I had to release that guilt.
We have a lot of parents that
can relate. How? I mean, there's just a number of different ways. I mean, we work with a clinical hypnotherapist.
Good.
And she is very good at helping helping me, but also helping my son directly when he's basically, because he feels when he's gone through a tough time, then he feels guilt afterwards. So
remorse.
Find a way to release that self-guilt. And I think addicts have an awful lot of that from the people I know I've seen.
Yeah. It's a lot of that. It's funny. We call them egomaniacs with the inferiority complex.
Yeah.
Because they give this bravado off, like they're so strong and nothing can touch them. And the reality is that the feet are moving like this underneath. And it looks all calm on the surface, but all is not well at home.
Well, the energy it takes to do that calm on the surface and not have it deep. And that's where hypnosis can really be helpful.
Yeah. Hypnosis is a great tool. We use meditation a lot.
Meditation.
Things that can get you out of your mood and mind without being unhealthy.
And meditation is fabulous. And actually, I mean, even my son, they worked through with him with these slow movement things. Like one thing was really neat. It was, I guess, to help the amygdala in that fight or flight. But they had him do extremely slow push-ups against the wall. I don't know if you've seen that.
I did walking meditation. Have you heard of John Kabat-Zinn? He's a meditator that's pretty well known, and he has this center in Atlanta. And I did a walking meditation one time and an eating meditation where you had to do both things way too slow.
Yeah.
Like being conscious about every bite. What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Smell? And in the moment you're going, how can this possibly help me balance my bills?
It rewires your brain is what it does. And if you find what works with me, and so this is what I do. I happen to like Pilates. I do that more than yoga, but yoga is very good. You know how slow yoga goes? And it's the same kind of thing. It's rewiring your brain at the same time. And you can and I find personally, I can't just sit and meditate.
Right.
I can't
either. I'm so happy you said that. Because I can't either.
I can't do it. But if I add it with a movement of some sort, like Pilates
a walk,
or just walking, it does just as well.
Well, and the reality is
they can't meditate. It's just because they say, well, I can't sit still. Well, then don't sit still. But have a movement.
I use music as a meditation and a prayer. Like, so certain songs I'll sing. I know sign language a little bit. So I'll sign to the songs.
Yeah. And
it's
it's
my
gratitude
expression.
statements or affirmations that you can find on YouTube.
Yeah.
That can be your meditation. Then you don't feel like, oh, I have to think up something to.
Right. I think that scares off a lot of people. They're like, there's just too much going on in my brain. How would I ever just sit still and do nothing? Well, that's the point.
Yeah. And breath work.
Yes. Take a breath, a pause. Our population has a thought, then an action.
Yeah.
We bring a pause in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Don't react, proactively.
And that's what I do when you said, how do I get through it? When times are really tough, really hard, I find a way to get off by myself, even if it's just the other side of the door of whatever. And I breathe slowly.
And nature. You mentioned nature.
Yeah.
You mentioned the breath, the hypnosis. I really enjoy this conversation as we're kind of coming to the close of this episode. Yeah. I want to just review kind of what you were talking about here. When in the beginning, it's tsunami. It's not little waves that lap up. And you have to find people that are going through something similar. Make sure that you honor that your situation is unique. And just because something worked for somebody else, it's not a bad idea to try it, but release the expectation. That's tough. But I want to ask you one final question. If you were sitting across from you, what would you tell your younger self to help you get through having a child with special needs?
What comes first to mind is, and I know this is fairly common, people say, but just breathe. Stop and breathe. Because I was frantically trying to find something that helped, frantic. And that frantic made my son frantic. So if I had figured out calming myself first, and just with a note, there will be a solution. And maybe somewhere there's a solution, there will be, but not in that frantic pitch, but more in the calming myself by saying that. I think that I would have gotten through much, much easier.
Yeah. Being easier on yourself. And I think that self-care that we spoke of earlier is so important because you can't fill from an empty cup. And so many of our parents just feel like they're running on fumes. So you have really given us some great tools and resources. I want to make sure that everybody knows that we can go get Robin's emails and social media. All of those things will be in the show notes. And so if you want to reach out to Robin, I would highly encourage that. She's just a great resource for helping our community and those that are a little bit different. You don't have to always do the same well-beaten path. You can figure it out on your own with help from other people that are like-minded, encouraging you along the way and helping you make those healthy choices and not go to those negative habits that you spoke of earlier. Mm-hmm. Well, Absolutely. Gosh, this has been great.
The other thing, it's progress, not perfection.
That's right.
So don't feel like you have to do everything perfectly. It's
those little moments of hope that you were talking about holding on to in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Then they'll have a cumulative effect. It's a lot down to trust and faith too, that what you're doing will pay off. Keep going.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Robin, I really have enjoyed my time talking with you today. I can't wait to have you back on the show. And I wish you all the luck in the world with your son and with everything that you're doing, and especially with the Living Well connections. It's good to meet a kindred spirit who's trying to create a community around an issue.
Right. And it's very easy to join the community. There'll be links and you'll see in the show notes, but it's free. It doesn't cost anything to join my community. Basically, I'm just looking for people who want support and want to give support.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And remember, the face of addiction is changing now. And so we need people like Robin and others that are going to guide us into this new day and age in a more positive direction and just coming from a source of filling your own cup up first and grabbing onto those moments of hope. And remember that acceptance is your friend. We can get through these things together. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Recovery Comes Home Radio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Recovery Comes Home Radio. We hope that today's episode has provided you with valuable information and insights on the recovery process. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Keep seeking support, practicing self-care, and moving forward one step at a time. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and stay humble. Hope lives here.